Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 151 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jackson's mom, Carrie. Now, again, this is the second time this summer where I've had a duplicate name. So before we talked with Jackson's mom and dad from St. Louis, Missouri, this is a different Jackson Chance. Jackson Chance's mom is from Chicago. They have started a really amazing organization called the Jackson Chance Foundation, and that I know you're going to want to hear more and more about. They are offering an amazing service that benefits all parents of babies who are in the NICU in the Chicagoland area, not just those who have lost their children. So you are going to love just hearing more and more about this, I know. If you have ever thought about wanting to be on the Always Andy's Mom podcast, please reach out. I love hearing from different listeners. So again, my email is Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, @andysmom.com. I am looking for guests who would like to share their stories on the podcast this coming fall. So if you'd like to share your story, please reach out. If you've thought about sharing your story but aren't quite sure, you can reach out anyway and we can have a chat about what that might entail. Also, if you would like to be involved in one of our Starlight Ministries virtual support groups that I help facilitate, please email Stephanie at starlightmin.org, where you can register to get have an intake done, so you can be in one of those virtual support groups starting up in September. We would love to have more participants. They are amazing programs. They have a wonderful curriculum, and their curriculum is actually also for sale if you wanted to think about starting your own support group in your own area. So please feel free to email Stephanie to find out more information either way, whether you'd like to be in a support group or you might even want to start one of your own. Right now, I just know you are going to enjoy listening to Carrie, Jackson's mom. Thank you so much, Carrie, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today and talk with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to have you. And I am excited to hear about your little guy, Jackson. It's funny because I just had another Jackson. I had Jackson's mom and dad on recently. So now you're Jackson's mom, different Jackson, but I get to hear about this one too.
Yeah, Jackson was born 11/11/11 at 11:11 p.m.
No way! That is so special.
Right. I always say he's as special as his birthday was unique. And it was early premature labor, emergency C-section. So there was no planning around to make that exact, time and date work. People always have a hard time believing, like, wait, did the doctor wait? I'm like, no, this was like a critical situation. So he looked up and called the time, like everyone's mouth was kind of like, that was crazy. But we were focused on other things. Mm-hmm. Jackson came about 10 weeks early. My husband and I had tried for many, many, many years through lots of IVFs and trials to get pregnant. So we were so excited. Yeah. He came early and he was actually, a pretty good, strong 31-week baby. And he was breathing on his own. And he did have to go to the NICU. But so for the first couple of months, we were certainly not thrilled to be in the hospital with him, but we were just excited and loving him and waiting for him to come home.
Yeah. Well, and you just think of a lot of those kiddos as when I was working in the NICU, we would call those just growers and feeders.
Yeah.
They just would feed and grow and everything was really pretty much run of the mill. You just increased their feedings every few days and kind of just watched them grow until they were strong enough to do it on their own. Mm-hmm.
Yep, exactly. We were just, waiting for him to get big enough to get home. Certainly it was still a scary experience and not what we were hoping for, but we were just so grateful and happy to have him. And he was a really sweet, happy baby, even when he was really sick. And then even as the time went on, he ended up staying in the NICU for 10 months, just shy of 10 months. He did go home one time for 48 hours.
Oh.
The first day was wonderful. And then we had a pretty scary experience where he ended back up in the hospital, and it was, kind of a close call to get him there. So,
oh my word, that's scary.
It was really scary. And so then we ended up, back in the hospital and doing some more, just letting him grow and get bigger and get stronger again. And then at about just shy of 10 months, he ended up getting hospital pneumonia, and his lungs just couldn't handle it. And then he took a decline pretty quickly and passed away just shy of 10 months.
Yeah, and that is really unusual to have a kid that's just born 10 weeks early stay for 10 months, because, usually we kind of tell parents that you shoot for going home on what would have been your due date.
Yeah.
Right? So the thought.
Yeah, I was going to share that. I had some issues before I went into labor where I had some leaking where I thought so I went and I was checked, and they said it wasn't amniotic fluid and I was fine. Uh-huh. But now we know, my water had actually broke much, much earlier, and they didn't catch it. So his lungs were actually that of probably a 24-weeker.
Right.
And he was 31 weeks. So he was also, a big 31-week baby with 24-week lungs.
Yeah.
And that didn't even come, really figured out till much later on. So even the doctors were a little confused by why he appeared so healthy and strong and big, and then he was struggling. And
yeah.
He wasn't a typical NICU baby to the doctors there.
No.
Yeah. I mean, 10 days before he passed, we were actually preparing for him to come home. We had the oxygen, he had a trach, so we had the home visits. We were ready for him to come home. And then, I still remember it was Labor Day. I walked in that morning and I looked at the monitor, and I grabbed, my nurse. I'm like, I think something's wrong with the monitor, because his heart rate was so high. He had never experienced that. And I just saw the look in her face, and I was like, oh, something happened last night. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. And he died that Friday.
Wow.
Yeah.
So something had suddenly just come out of the blue with this pneumonia?
Yeah, I don't think it was suddenly. I think to me it felt suddenly, where that was that moment where I actually, for the first time, thought, oh, he might not come home. I don't think I ever considered that before. Mm-hmm. And then it was just, he couldn't, from the trach and the hospital pneumonia, he just couldn't fight it.
Just didn't have the strength to be able to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It is funny, though. I think you're right. And I've said this so many times in the podcast about it being just hard to wrap your head around the idea that it won't just end up okay, that you won't just end up home, right? You have a baby that's born 10 weeks early, and I'm sure at the beginning they're like, okay, so plan on an extra 10 weeks. We'll just let him wait and grow, and he's going to be great. And then it's just one of those things that was ever so slowly, things didn't improve like they were supposed to, right? So it ends up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was just going to say, so it ends up being, it's not like this big, huge moment. There was with the pneumonia at the very end, but I'm thinking throughout those 10 months or 9 months, you must have, it was just little setbacks that didn't ever make you think, oh, this is not going to end well, right? Yeah.
There's definitely moments. There's a lot of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. And then there was a lot of okay, don't waste your worry. I would worry about a surgery and he'd be fine. And then, so how do you know what to worry, not to worry about? And then I could worry every single moment. So it was kind of don't let my mind go at the worst case scenarios, because I need to enjoy every moment I have with him. Mm-hmm. And I think I just couldn't think about that there might not be that many. I just wanted to really focus on the ones that we had.
Right.
I don't think I'd let my brain even go there. But I mean, I don't think,
Right.
I think that's maybe more unusual than usual after being in the NICU. I mean, you've spent time there, but I just couldn't, I don't know. I probably looked a little delusional and happy in the NICU, you know, like hanging
Well,
out with
but
my
it's your
baby.
first baby,
Yeah.
and you just
Yeah.
waited, I mean, years, it sounds like, right?
Yeah. Oh, many years. Yeah.
I mean, this was it. This, you've put in your
Yeah.
time. You've gone through all this kind of
Yeah.
suffering, and the
Yeah.
fact that you had to wait, so long,
Yeah.
and you had so much struggle. You think, okay, we're good now,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I hoped.
I mean,
Yeah.
certainly that's what you think. I
Yeah.
I remember thinking to myself similarly. So I lost my mom when I was in college, and both my parents actually had cancer when I was in high school, and then I lost my mom, and I sort of felt like I had my bad thing. My teens and early 20s were kind of, I mean, they kind of stunk, right? I mean,
Yeah.
went through a
Yeah.
ton of stuff, and I thought, okay, but now I've had my bad thing, so now things are
Yeah.
going to be good. And I would think for
Yeah.
you, you were
No.
like,
Mhm.
infertility was my bad thing,
Yeah.
so now things are going to be
Mhm.
good,
Yeah.
right?
I didn't feel that way, but I could certainly see how, like your story, you were like, okay, my life story is not going to have another tragedy. Like,
Right,
come on, that's too much. Like, okay, I can take a deep breath because I've had my tragedies. I'm kind
right,
of lucky there in the game, right?
right.
Which I don't feel that way now because I almost feel like, oh God, I don't know if I could handle another
No,
one
I know.
versus
I
like,
totally
here's
don't feel like
my
that way now.
checklist.
I
Yeah,
totally don't. It
yeah,
changes
yeah,
you when you have
yeah,
like this
absolutely.
awfulness, then
Yeah,
you end up knowing that it could
yeah,
happen and that it could happen
yeah,
again. Hmm.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so why
Absolutely.
don't you talk now about, so you've suddenly kind of had this pneumonia happen, and then, over the course of a week, it sounds like went from thinking he was going home to losing him. Talk about
Yeah.
that time a little bit.
That's kind of super vivid and like a whirlwind in my brain. Like
Yeah.
my mom came in, my dad came in. I remember vividly, we have a really close friend who is a peds doctor, and she came in and she was like, Carrie hates, like 2 days before, she's like, I have to tell you this. Like, you need to tell them what you want to happen if something starts happening to him, because if he like has an episode right now, they're going to come in and doctors and nurses are going to swarm and you're not going to be with him. Like, you have to decide. Like, she was like preparing me, and it was like I wanted to tell her just to shut up. Like, I didn't want to
Right.
talk about it, but
Right.
like, so we were able to call my mom in, call my dad in. We told the doctors what could happen. He ended up dying like in my arms. Like, so she really was such an angel to us, where she gave us that like ability to like really not plan out his last few days, but really, make them as special as we could. And even like he was very sedated. So we talked about, should we take his sedation off a little bit so he can be more alert? So we had a little more time with him, and just all these decisions that allowed kind of that last 48 hours to be terrible and special at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and you had a little bit more control. I mean, obviously not a lot of control, but a little bit more control than you might have otherwise. That was definitely a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mean, as terrible as it sounds, but I knew like the minute like I started holding him on Thursday, I felt like if I moved him or stopped, he might, like, he's so fragile on that. Like, he's just, any last breath could be his last breath. And like, I remember, like, I was probably so dehydrated because I didn't want to have to get up to pee. Like,
Yeah.
I just, like, I held him, like, I felt really bad. I wasn't going to give him to my husband, but like that movement. So like, he was just sitting next to me, like together, but it was just, I mean, it's not like we could, we didn't plan it, but just
No.
to able to be there,
Well,
and like, I remember,
I think to cherish it, right? You have some
Yeah,
moments
yeah.
to cherish, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't leave the hospital from that moment I told you about. And I remember like people coming in there, I mean, like, you need to go home, you need to get your rest. And I'd be like, are you crazy? Like, no. Or they'd be like, oh, they like, they got a room. They like, the hospital has like rooms for families. Like, oh, they set up a room for me upstairs. I'm like, what? So I'm gonna go sleep upstairs? Like, no, like, so I remember it was more of a fight to be like, just leave me alone. Let's leave us alone, than it was, to be there. But I remember walking to Walgreens that's so vivid, these weird memories, like one time to get a snack at like 3 a.m. because like, I just, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was so terrified being away those like 5 minutes.
Well, it's because you knew that your time was very precious and very limited.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think back to, obviously I lost Andy suddenly in a car accident, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think to what I would have given for 5 more minutes, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I would just give anything for 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
And then you think you had like people telling
Yeah.
you to give up 6 hours to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
not when you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that you,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, how do I really want to spend those 6 hours? Do I want to be holding my baby or sleeping?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what
When
my
I
answer would have been for sure.
read, when I read your story, that was super impactful to me about how I read that they took him and you didn't see him for 4 days later, and you never, and like, it took me right back to like how grateful I was for those last few days where like, I mean, it's really crazy and it's a really strange experience to have someone like take their last breath in your arms, especially your son. But it's like the most special, meaningful thing ever. And especially when I like read a story like yours, it just reminds me how grateful I am that we were able to, to be there with him.
Yeah. I mean, it's so, there's just like no good way, but I'm glad that what we can do is appreciate some of the things that we have, right? And when you can appreciate the gifts that you did have, I mean, I feel fortunate that, I had 14 great years with him. You did not get that, right?
I know.
So,
exactly.
So that's
exactly.
It's a blessing that I had that you didn't have. And you had 2 days with him at home, right? I had years with my son at home.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's, yeah, you're right. You have to, I think, really, to get through it, you have to focus on what you had and what you can appreciate instead of if you can't focus on what you didn't have, or you just, won't survive it.
Right. You'll just end up in such a bad, dark place. I mean, not that we aren't all in a dark place. And I mean, that's definitely true, right? It's a dark hole that you're in, but it is nice when you can be able to grasp onto little glimmers of little silver linings. I've had some guests say little silver linings that you have had in your own story, or silver linings that have come from your story.
Right.
Yeah. So, talk about then afterwards. So, just even those days, I mean, going home without Jackson and all of that stuff, right? Especially when you've been there so long and it's been such a part of your life.
Yeah. I mean, I can picture it like it was yesterday, like the car, my husband driving up the car, and like nurses, like we were there for so long, like, I still keep in contact with nurses and doctors from the hospital, right? They were all there, like leaving without your baby. And like, knowing I'm never coming back. Like that was just, leaving was just, that was just terrible. It was just, you just want to like leave your body. Like, I don't know how to explain it. And then the next couple of days are just a whirlwind where I'm like, now I'm planning a funeral.
Yeah.
And then like, I remember going from place to place and just being like, my mom was there, my sisters were there. And I was like, I'm in the back seat. Like it took me back to being a teenager. We're all, in the same car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to, and like, I would leave a place the way thinking, I'm like, they're all terrible. They're all terrible. Like, I don't want to be at any one of them,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then like, I remember people like being like, oh, you have to eat. I'm like, no, I don't. Like, not my family, but like other friends. I'm like, why are people making me eat? I'm like, people do fast for a week all the time. Why are you forcing me to eat? Like, I don't like, but people like, they try and like make you do things and you're like, okay, everything's out of control. I don't need like people telling me what I need. Like,
I remember thinking too, if I don't eat regularly, I will get a migraine headache. That's been like me forever.
Oh,
right. I will get a migraine headache. And so people wanted me to eat, but in all actuality, I wanted to have a migraine headache. For the first time in my life, I wanted to, because I wanted my physical body to feel as bad as my emotional self did. And I thought, if I get a really horrible migraine, then now I'm physically feeling as cruddy as I am emotionally. And that seemed right with the world. Like, right?
I get that.
Yeah. Just like going outside, it felt like it should be raining. It should be raining. Yeah. It should not be nice and sunny and beautiful. Yeah. And you need to have, just to make it right somehow, everything needed to be messed up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, I absolutely understand saying I wanted a migraine. Like,
Yeah.
I think that probably sounds crazy to most people, but like,
Yeah.
I absolutely, as soon as you said it, I'm like, that makes perfect sense.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course it
Yeah,
does.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was recently talking with a cancer team. And so I went to the local hospital and was speaking with cancer team. And I was talking about how, when a loved one dies, when they've had an illness like cancer, people lose so much of their support system because the hospital staff that has been with them through that cancer journey, which can be months or years long, become closer to them than many family and friends. And I feel like that's very similar to what you're sharing now, and that your NICU family, I mean, you saw them more than
Yeah.
many of your actual family.
Yeah. I mean, the NICU is also very restrictive. We were at two different hospitals, they had different rules, but people couldn't just like stop in and visit. So they absolutely become like your family and they're there for you. Like, I was very reluctant and protective of sharing Jackson with friends, and meaning I didn't like post pictures on Facebook or like, text out a bunch of pictures of him. I was very protective of him and his wires, and then you got the trach and all that, but just in a protective way. I mean, I honestly, the week, 10 days before we thought he was coming home was the first time I actually created like a private group, invited people, and shared all these photos of Jackson saying he was going to be coming home soon.
Wow.
So, I mean, I say that because so the people who know Jackson or who knew him were the hospital staff, which is why I still talk with his nurses this many years later on some of his
Well, and I'm
documentation.
so glad that they do that, because that was kind of my point to these people you don't understand just how important you are to them. And that when they don't only lose their loved one, now they lost their entire support system.
Yeah.
And also, I think about losing part of your identity too when you are like the caregiver and that's what you're doing. And I think about with you just spent those weeks and months in the hospital kind of just being Jackson's mom, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being that. And then all of a sudden, like that part of you, you're not the hospital anymore. You don't have Jackson anymore. It's not just losing Jackson, it's losing a lot of you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did maintain working while I was at the hospital.
Okay.
I was able to work from the hospital
that's
like
good.
most of the time, which is great. And I had an amazing, so I was running a hotel at the time. And so I had an amazing like team of people who really took responsibilities for me, came around us and like supported us. It was really hard to go back to work,
Right.
to go into the hotel like a week later.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember just dreading that and dreading that. They were the most amazing. They all had these, they were on his birthday. They like, I had pins made with his picture on, and the whole staff wore them. We're talking like 100 people. Like, I mean, they were like the most amazing supportive team, but it was still really, really hard to go back.
Yeah.
See people.
Well, it is, especially because you've been kind of doing stuff, and then all of a sudden now you're just emotionally devastated, like we were talking about. You emotionally just feel like the worst of the worst, right? And then now you have this expectation like, well, you don't have to be in the hospital anymore, so I guess you should just go back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you got the support, though.
Yeah. No, for sure.
I mean, some people don't. I've heard some pretty horrible stories about, how long are you going to be like this kind of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I've heard those too. I saw them. I mean, because being there for 10 months, I saw so many families come in and out through the NICU. So I saw a lot of unfortunate, people who didn't have the support that I wish they would have had.
So why don't you talk a little bit about because you're doing some pretty cool stuff now in Jackson's memory. So talk about how that came about.
Yeah. I mean, I think early on it was kind of twofold. I was very uncomfortable being that poor mom who lost her kid, right? I couldn't make that my identity because I was, no. I had him for 10 months. I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Right.
Yes, I know you feel bad for me, but like, I'm still so grateful and blessed that I was his mom for 10 months. And then one of the biggest things I think I kept thinking was I needed to honor Jackson. And I kept thinking about my own mom And if something happened to me, what I would want for her. And I would have been mad and furious if she like broke down and like ruined her life or couldn't move. Like I would never want to be the cause of pain for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking I couldn't do that to Jackson. I have to, by me getting up and moving forward and do something positive and trying to celebrate his life, I'm honoring Jackson
Mm-hmm.
versus having his short life, any negatives on me or my life or my family's life or my husband's life. And that's, I think, what keeps me going to this day, where I'm like, okay, I can't break down because that's not honoring him.
Right. I mean, I've seen that, right? On social media, I've seen moms that are like, my life is over. My child is dead. My life is over. And so you don't want his death to mean the end of your life too. And because
right. I don't want to put that I don't want to put that burden on him. Like I would feel terribly guilty that like, like, I mean, if I like knew that something happened to me and I like hurt my mom in that, like, I mean, of course I did. I mean, and then I intellectually, well, of course it's for you. I mean, I get that, but like,
absolutely. And no judgment, obviously. No judgment.
Yeah, of course not. That's just like, so quickly we decided we wanted to like raise money in his honor and do something to honor Jackson. And so my husband and I spent like the next 2 months really deciding what we wanted it to be and what the impact we wanted. And we really kept going back to one that Jackson was so happy. And like, if we say he fooled the doctors, it was because we made his NICU like a nursery and we were there like all the time. And so what we found when we were in the NICU was that the parking was so expensive. The first 6 weeks, we ended up spending almost $2,000 to park. It was just outrageous. And so throughout the NICU, we saw that the cost of parking was a true obstacle for families to be there, and it limited them visiting as much as they wanted. So we decided to start the NICU Transportation program at NICUs, where we give every baby, I like to say we give to the baby, a 24/7 unlimited parking pass with in and out privileges that they can give to a loved one. So we're giving that baby the opportunity to have somebody with them 24/7.
Yeah. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah. We figured, as a gift that we gave Jackson, and if we could give other babies that in his memory and his honor, that would really be impactful and be meaningful to us.
Because which hospitals were you at? You were at a couple hospitals.
We were at Northwestern Women's Prentice Hospital in downtown Chicago. And then we were at Lurie Children's, which was Children's Hospital, and then it moved to be Lurie Children's downtown in the middle of our stay. So it was really the two hospitals.
And they all charged for parking? Because not all hospitals do, I didn't think.
Yeah. Well, if you're in the city and urban environments, often the hospitals don't own the garages or there's other factors involved, and they'll validate it. So it's $10, but typically that $10 is, 7 hours or less.
Yeah. It's
once a day. It's for one person. I mean, like, I wanted to go and I'm like C-section recovering and pumping, like taking, public transportation is not feasible for much of it. So parking, and so like, and then you want to come and go. So, like when you're there a long time, like you have to walk your dog, you have to other kids. If you even get a $10 validation, that's one time. Yeah. So like if you're the dad goes, the mom goes, you need to go somewhere that's 3 times. I mean, it could cost 30, 40, 50, so much a day, which we saw it happening. And we also learned later on that as not as serious level of NICU, suburban hospitals, families would say, I can't be transferred to Lurie because I can't afford the parking, which Lurie is like one of the top, 10 hospitals. And once we started our program, the hospital doctors that told us, they got feedback that we've eliminated that from families. So babies who might otherwise not have gone to this, high level critical hospital were now coming because we were able to give them these parking passes.
Oh, that's amazing. So how long have you been doing this now?
I'm super proud. Within 1 year of Jackson passing, we started the first NICU transportation program at Lurie Children.
Okay.
So that was 2013. So we're pushing 9 years. We're at 3 hospitals. We provide over 90,000 parking passes a year, days of parking every year.
Oh.
So it's great. Yeah. And it's been, obviously a way I've dealt with my grief. And it's a way, it really allows me to be able to talk about Jackson now all day, every day, in a really positive way, which I think talking about a child who passed away is really hard for other people.
Yeah.
And this gives them a window to be able to ask me and talk about him in such a different way, where I think that's like an ancillary gift I never anticipated from it.
It's amazing if you give people that little window to be able to ask. They really want to, right?
Yeah.
I know that it's like you just give them permission. I saw a woman, was golfing with her this week, and I hadn't seen her in a couple of years, and I said something about Andy, and then pretty soon she started asking me little questions about things.
Yeah, right.
Because all of a sudden it was like, oh, he's not, off limits to talk about. You brought him up.
Yeah.
So that means maybe I can ask you, and I can ask you, do you feel Andy? Do you see Andy in places? What's one thing she asked me? And then she started asking me about the podcast. I mean, it just like little things that she wanted to ask, right? We've been together for an hour and a half, and she probably had desperately wanted me to ask from the beginning, but she didn't know if it was really okay until I gave her the little glimpse that, oh yeah, it's totally fine. We can talk about that. It's completely okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so true, because there are the kind of other side of the spectrum where people I have people now who are like, even like parents or friends who are like, oh, I had a daughter who died when they were 2. I had a baby who died when they were 6 months, who come and tell me later, who like, I mean, it's this big secret from them, because I think from maybe some of the other generation, it was a little more taboo. Maybe it's becoming less now, but I think people don't ask sometimes because they just don't know which route you're taking. So your podcast or what I'm doing gives that quote permission for them to, open that door, which I think is great. I think we should be able to talk about loved ones who aren't here. It's kind of confusing when you have one, or why. I mean, my other kids talk about their brother Jackson like all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's good for them. I mean, they know they know the situation. And I think it's healthy for them to have this different relationship with a loved one who's passed. So then it might be easier when I die for them, because they can still have I can model how they'll still have a relationship with me when I'm.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about it, it would be weird if I have my 3 kids and my foster son too. So I've got 4 kids. And if I just wouldn't talk about one of them, I mean, really, that'd be weird when you think about it. Yeah. Like, just because he's not living anymore, I talk about other stories from my other kids that from years past, and then he's not okay, like an okay person to talk about. Although I do have to say, like, as a pediatrician, I will sometimes tell little funny personal stories to my patients to make them feel better about some, something going on with their kids. And I never tell them that the kid that I just told them the story about is dead, because I know that it will make them feel really uncomfortable. Yeah. Yeah. But I do like to be able to still tell the story, and it's kind of nice that they don't even know, and then they don't give me the weird look like you just told me about. I can just tell a really funny story and have them laugh and think it's hilarious.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what about my dad's not here. I can tell a funny story about him without any hesitation.
And no one would think that's weird, right?
Nobody would think that's weird. I mean, I know it's very interesting when you really start to think about it.
Right. But if you talk about your child who is dead, that's totally weird. Yeah. And just
because it's too painful for people to think about and handle it.
And I think they just can't handle the idea that if it happened to you, that means it could happen to me, and I can't even think about it happening to me. So please just keep your mouth shut. Really.
Exactly. Yeah, I know.
So you started this, this program started in 2013. Talk about what's been going on now these past 9 years. What do you do to raise money and just things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, we didn't intend for it to become this big program. It took on a life of its own. I mean, our goal the first year was to raise like $20,000, $30,000, and we got close to $400,000.
my gosh.
I know. We ended up getting a lot of press. My husband and I ended up being on the Chicago Tribune Sunday cover story.
Oh my word. Wow.
I know. The story kept getting a little more and more. And then we ended up I opened the paper and it was like a picture of him and I at Jackson's graveside. And they were talking about Jackson and the parking, what we were doing. And from then on, it kind of just took on a life of its own.
Wow.
We have a couple, one thing that I think has really led to our success is we provide parking, only parking. That's it. We've stayed extremely focused. So we're very clear on what we do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other, really great things we could provide for families, but we don't. So we just stay really focused, which I think has been resonated with our donors a lot. So they know what they're providing, where their money's going, how much it costs, very specific, detailed out in our materials. And so we have two main annual fundraisers that we do. One is we have Team Chance. So Jackson Chance was his name. So Team Chance, our athletic team. And every August we do an 111 mile in honor of the 11s, 111 mile bike ride.
Oh my gosh.
I know. So we ride from Chicago to Valparaiso and then back, and it's a really fun, leisurely. It sounds crazy to say 111 leisurely miles.
I know, that's what those two words do not go together at all.
No, but it's not like a super competitive ride in that sense.
Okay. I get that.
Yeah. So we have nurses who ride. One of Jackson's primary nurses rides every year with us. So it's really great. So that's one of, we get sponsors and people, raise money when they ride. And then our main fundraiser is that we have our ping pong ball, which is a table tennis tournament. And, and it's an auction with the DJ and a party. And it's really fun. And that's every November.
Oh, around the 11th, I imagine. Maybe
yes,
not on the 11th, but around the 11th.
Oh, well, this year it's on the 10th. And so the 11th would be his golden birthday, 11 and 11. So we are having a special after party to celebrate what would be his golden birthday, which is great. So yeah, and we have a great board now. We have an event committee for the event of probably 40 people who are just really supportive and committed to really helping, raise money and support other families. And what I didn't realize also is that there's so many NICU parents who are involved in our charity. Who spent time in the NICU. Some lost children, some have older NICU children, but they are so grateful for a way that they can honor that NICU experience or give back to other NICU families or honor their child. Or I didn't even realize then, how we would be providing an avenue to those other families, which again is super rewarding for us as parents of, to think that our son has inspired all of this.
Yeah, that's a really great point, that it's not just really helping bereaved parents at all. It's much larger than that because, obviously the majority of kids that have long NICU experiences actually do go home. So it's more open that way to be able to, reach even more people really in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I love how you have kept that sort of narrow focus. It's funny because you have people that give you all sorts of ideas, right?
Yeah.
After your child dies. We did.
Yeah.
I had quite a few people that told me that I needed to go to Lansing. Lansing is the capital of Michigan, and I needed to testify on rules for distracted drivers, right? Because she was clearly distracted. I don't know what she was doing. I'll never know what she was doing, but she wasn't paying attention when she hit us. And, there ought to be a law type of thing. And that's what I should do. Or, you should do this or you should do that or whatever. People have all these ideas. But if you're not called to that, you're not called to that. I was not called to go to Lansing and talk about distracted driving. And as awful as it is, and I mean, let somebody else do that. That is, if they're called to do that, they are. That was not my calling. My calling was to talk with bereaved parents and to start the podcast. And that has been very rewarding to me and what I felt like I could do. And it's my little niche. And that is really what I see with you too, is You could have gone a million different directions, but you felt called to do this one thing and do that one thing really well, by the way.
We wanted one thing to be impactful. You know what I mean? Instead of getting spread things, really have an impact. But like you said, everyone has an opinion of what, like, of what you should do, what you should think, or, you know, and they don't know what to say, and they can, you know, say the most terrible things, you know, unintentionally, but
I
mean, you have to do what was important and meaningful to you. And people just sometimes I think they just are looking for things to say too, right? They just don't know what to say. So they just kind of just talk to talk and.
Yeah. Just things that you ought to do right. Because I think they just are trying to figure out how to make you better, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to make you better.
Yeah. Yeah, they can. And I mean, I always say, like, my heart is broken for life.
Right.
It's never. So like when I had my son after, I'm like, oh, he just gave me some glue. So I'm gluing it back together, but it's still broken. Like it'll always be broken. I've just learned to live with a broken heart. I learned to have joy inside a broken heart.
Yes. And you can have joy and feel joy when your heart is broken all at the same time.
Yeah. But it's different than it was before.
Yeah.
I can still be very joyous. There's still always that sadness there. There's always that Jackson's not here with us, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm okay with that. I don't need, you know what I mean? I don't need the alternative, but like, I won't get over it. Time doesn't heal everything. It's not going to just pass. All that, like, those things people say are well-meaning.
I love hearing you say that, because I say that all the time. That's such a fallacy that time heals all wounds. Like, really hard work can heal wounds, but just time? No, time heals nothing.
No. And like it's healed, but it's always there. Like, right. Like I say, my heart is broken forever. Yeah.
You've always got a scar. You've got that jar. I love the jar analogy. I think about that a lot too, that like you are glued back together. You are not the same jar you used to be. And the glue can be really beautiful. Right?
Absolutely.
It can. And there is beauty in my broken jar. It's still broken, but there's beauty there.
Yeah. I mean, people really disappoint when you go through something like this. And some people really, really step up and surprise you. And you learn. And I think that, like, my life, I'm really focused on what I spend my time on, what I invest in, what I don't. I mean, people who disappointed me, I'm not mad at them. I just now kind of know who they are.
Yeah.
And then I choose to invest differently than I may have before.
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? And it really helps me make choices in life better and prioritize, because I feel like I have a new, you know, understanding what's really important in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It does change your perspective. 100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about having other kids after Jackson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So talk about that a little bit, because that must have been trying, really.
Yeah, I have one other son who I got pregnant way quicker than I anticipated. So I was pregnant April after the following year after he passed.
Wow.
Which, you know, didn't expect, since it took so long with Jackson. And it was really tough and bittersweet.
Yeah.
And I was really anxious about it. And I remember really, really wanting a girl, because I didn't want a comparison with Jackson. Like, I just didn't want. And so then I remember, like, being in the ultrasound and finding out we were having a boy and just, like, losing it. My husband just looked at me and he, like, grabbed my hand. And he's like, Jackson wants you to have a boy. And I was like, oh, okay. It was, like, crazy to me how it's like he just said that. And I was like, okay.
Okay, now we can go there.
Okay. All right. You're right. That's true. Right. Okay. And now, like, I mean, I have a stepson who's older. And so now I have 3 boys, and I'm like, I'm a boy mom. Like, but now, like, I couldn't be anything other than a boy mom. So it's kind of funny when I think, like, I really wanted the girl. And then when Maxon, which is funny because Maxon was his name is Maxon. It was a little bit of a nod to Jackson. His name is Maxon. His middle name is just the initial J. But I never anticipated I would be saying their names together, Maxon and Jackson, which is funny.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a high-risk pregnancy and followed. And he was early too. And he was almost 6 weeks early. And I remember when my water broke, I was like, okay, I was 34 weeks, 5 days. And thought I would just be like admitted and go on, bed rest and kind of wait it out. And they were, I had to I gave birth within 24 hours. And because I think he was under 35, he had to go to the NICU for observation. And I just remember being so furious that he had to go to the NICU. Like, I could not believe it. I was so mad. But when I was going to the hospital when my water broke, I texted Jackson's main primary nurse. I was like, you're not going to believe it. I'm on my way to the hospital. I think I might,
Yeah.
She was like, you're not going to believe it. I literally was supposed to be off all week. I just picked up a shift 20 minutes ago.
No.
So, yeah. So she was there waiting for my next son when they took him to the NICU, and got him, brought him in there. And she took care of him for that week. Jackson's main primary. Which is it was just crazy to me.
That is just such a blessing how that worked out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I do remember thinking, okay, this is now 1 week in the NICU. It was so hard, but he was perfectly healthy, observation, nothing. But I almost felt like, okay, Jackson was like, don't forget about me and the work you're doing now that you have another kiddo. Don't forget what it's like to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Because it reminded us what it was like to be there, what it was like to leave, what it was like to park even for a week and come and go.
Yeah.
So it was a good reminder to don't get distracted now and still continue on with the foundation.
I'm sorry, I'm just almost getting choked up because I'm thinking about, though, it's almost like Jackson wanted his brother to experience a little bit of his life for a week, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like it was just meant to be for him to do that a little, not a lot, but for him to see this is what my brother's life was like for, 10 months.
Yeah.
And how you got just a little taste of it with the same nurse, the same,
I know. Yeah. I know. It's just amazing,
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, I go visit Jackson at his graveside on the 11th every month. And I've done that since he passed. And with my little guy, he comes with me every month. And every month he's like, Mom, it's the 11th. We're going to go visit Jackson. And it's such a special relationship. So he'll bring him a toy and he talks about it. And I remember he said to me after my dad died, he's like, can we go visit Grandpa? I'm like, no, do you remember Grandpa died? He's like, no, go visit him like we go visit Jackson. And I was like, oh, wow. It was so interesting that he wanted, I think he was 6 at the time.
Yeah.
So it's just so interesting how, the relationships carry over, and my nieces and stuff write papers on Jackson and his time and the foundation. And it's just so great to see how his life touches so many people.
Right.
Even though it was, only 10 months.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's been a fear of mine really out since the beginning that there'll be a day that I'm the only one who remembers, And when you have some of those things happen that show you that other people remember, it's just so precious.
So precious. I was at the cemetery 2 weeks ago. I'm driving out and this guy comes chasing my car who was he works at the cemetery.
Yeah.
And he was like, I have a bumper sticker for the foundation on my car. It's like, I saw you have a Jackson Chance bumper sticker. He's like, so you're Jackson's mom? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he was running. And he's like, I had a daughter 2 years ago. She went to the NICU. You gave us a parking pass. Thank you so much. And he says, I visit Jackson often. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's somebody in the cemetery.
Yeah.
And I go there and I see things on his graveside that I didn't bring, my husband didn't bring. I'm like, where'd they come from?
I know.
So it is like you said, so knowing that some strange man is just going to visit him. It's just it's really overwhelming, the good you could, in people too. So
yeah, I know that the funeral director said to me, I wrote to him a while back just because I just wanted to thank him for how caring he was for us in that time. And yeah, I just wrote to him kind of out of the blue and I told him about what I was doing. And he actually since then had lost his brother, his brother had died. think he told his mom about the podcast and things like that. And he said, whenever I'm at that cemetery, I go visit Andy. And I was like, here he's a funeral director. That's all he does.
Yeah.
And when he is at that cemetery, he visits my son because that he made an impact on him, even though he never knew him. Just our family and our family's, story. And I thought, man, I can't believe that he does that. I mean, it just feels really special when you hear things like that. Yeah. So the foundation is called the Jackson Chance Foundation. Is that the whole name? So I'm sure you have a website that people can visit.
Yep, jacksonchance.org.
jacksonchance.org. Oh, I just love what you're doing. And it's just so cool that you're making such a difference in people's lives, and that Jackson's making a difference in people's lives every single day.
Yeah.
That's what I love about doing work like this, is that you can still do something with your kid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yours is living through you right now.
Yeah, this is what I do. This is what the two of us do together. And that's what you and Jackson and your whole family do together every day, is help people just to be able to go visit their child and make some special memories that they wouldn't have been able to make had they not had that parking pass, right?
Absolutely.
Just wishing to be there and seeing on a camera is not the same as actually being there. That's for sure.
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you again for coming on the podcast today. I have just loved talking to you. And I know that this is just going to continue to touch so many people in that Chicago area. It's awesome.
I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful or would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can text Andy's Mom to the number 53555 or visit the donate page on andysmom.com. Your donations are secure and tax deductible, and we are now able to accept Venmo, PayPal, and Apple Pay. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 organization and can receive donations through smile.amazon.com, Thrivent Financial, and Benevity, amongst others. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com. Also, be sure to sign up for the email list to receive weekly updates as well as pictures of all of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.